July 4th, 1997, Independence Day in Las Vegas. While fireworks exploded over the Strip and tourists celebrated America's birthday with cheap buffets and expensive mistakes, something extraordinary was happening inside Harrah's Hotel and Casino. At 11:47 p.m., a woman in her 30s sat down at a megabucks slot machine near the hotel lobby. Security footage would later show her inserting $3, pulling the lever once, and then freezing as the reels aligned. Triple sevens, maximum payout, $3.7 million. The woman screamed. Casino staff rushed over. Champagne appeared. Photographers materialized. Within minutes, Harrah's marketing team was already planning the publicity campaign around their newest millionaire. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. But in the casino's surveillance room, something was wrong. "Run it back," the head of security said, staring at the monitors. "Show me the hour before she sat down." They rewound the footage, watched normal casino activity, people losing money, people winning small amounts, the usual rhythm of Vegas separating tourists from their cash. Then at 11:31 p.m., the camera angle shifted slightly, just a few degrees, enough to partially obscure the megabucks machine. "Who moved that camera?" the security chief demanded. Nobody had. According to the system logs, the camera hadn't been touched, but for exactly 8 minutes, from 11:31 to 11:39 p.m., the megabucks machine was partially hidden from view, and in that 8-minute window, several people had stood in front of it, blocking what little visibility remained. When the woman sat down 8 minutes later, the machine paid out the biggest jackpot in Harrah's history. Coincidence? The security team didn't think so, but they had no proof of tampering, no evidence of fraud, no way to deny the payout without facing a massive lawsuit. The woman collected her $3.7 million. Harrah's paid out through gritted teeth, and somewhere in Las Vegas, a man named Dennis Nikrash smiled. He just pulled off the biggest slot machine heist in history, and nobody even knew they'd been robbed. This is the story of how an ordinary locksmith became the most sophisticated casino thief America has ever seen. How he stole $16.7 million over 22 years, how he beat every security system Vegas could design, and how his own greed finally brought him down. Chicago, 1970. 20-year-old Dennis McAndrew had a problem, a big problem. He was sitting in an interrogation room at Chicago Police Headquarters, handcuffed to a table, facing a minimum of 10 years in prison for breaking and entering. The detective across from him was patient, professional. He laid out Dennis's options clearly. "You've been caught breaking into jewelry stores, high-end residences, luxury vehicles. We have witnesses. We have evidence. We have you dead to rights." The detective paused. "But we both know you're not working alone. Tell us who you're working for, and we can make this easier on you." Dennis said nothing. The detective leaned forward. "We know it's the Genovese family. We know they're using you as their locksmith. Doors you can open, they can rob. It's a good arrangement for them, not so good for you." Still nothing. "Son, these people don't care about you. You're a tool to them, useful until you're not. Help us put them away, and we'll help you." Dennis McAndrew looked the detective in the eye and said 5 words that would define the rest of his life. "I want to call my lawyer." He never gave up a single name, never provided a single detail about his work with the Genovese crime family, one of New York's 5 major mafia organizations who'd expanded operations to Chicago in the late 1960s. His silence earned him respect from people you didn't want as enemies, and cost him 9 years of his life. In 1979, Dennis walked out of Illinois State Prison. He was 29 years old. He'd lost his 20s to a cell, lost his father, who died while he was inside, lost any chance at a normal life. But he'd gained something too. 9 years to think, to plan, to learn from his mistakes. The mistake wasn't getting caught. The mistake was working for someone else. Dennis made 2 decisions during those 9 years. First, he would never again share the profits of his crimes. Second, he would find a crime so sophisticated, so perfectly executed, that getting caught would be virtually impossible. He just needed to find the right target. 2 weeks after his release, Dennis packed everything he owned into a dented Ford sedan and drove west. Drove until the flat plains of Illinois gave way to desert, until the desert gave way to neon. Las Vegas, Nevada, the city where fortunes were made and lost on the turn of a card, where casinos took in millions every day, where money flowed like water and security was supposedly impenetrable. Dennis McAndrew arrived in Vegas with $847 in his pocket, a criminal record, and a plan forming in his mind. He also arrived with a new name. Too many people in Chicago knew Dennis McAndrew. Too many connections to his past. Too many questions he didn't want to answer. So he became Dennis Nickresh, taking his mother's maiden name and leaving his old identity behind. Fresh start, new city. Nobody knew him here, and nobody would suspect that the quiet, ordinary-looking man who just moved into a cheap apartment on the edge of town was about to become the most successful casino thief in American history. Dennis spent his first 3 months in Vegas just watching. He'd walk the strip for hours observing. He'd sit in casino bars, nursing cheap beer, studying the flow of people and money. He paid attention to security patterns, camera placements, staff shift changes, the thousand small details that most people never noticed. But mostly he watched the slot machines. In 1979, slot machines were mechanical marvels. Simple in concept, complex in execution. Insert a coin, pull a lever, watch the reels spin. If the symbols aligned, the machine would complete an electrical circuit and trigger a payout. The biggest jackpots could reach $10,000 or more. Substantial money in 1979. And Vegas was packed with thousands of these machines, all of them holding cash, all of them supposedly secure. Dennis watched people play, watched them lose, occasionally watched them win small amounts, and he thought there has to be a way in. The problem was risk. Casino security in Vegas was no joke. Cameras everywhere. Trained observers watching for suspicious behavior. Plainclothes security mingling with gamblers. The casinos had been dealing with cheats since the day they opened. They knew every trick. Dennis needed to be smarter, more careful. He needed to understand these machines completely before he tried anything. So he bought one. Finding a used slot machine for sale wasn't hard. Casinos regularly sold off older models when they upgraded their equipment. Dennis paid $380 for a 3-reel mechanical slot machine, had it delivered to his apartment, and got to work. What followed was an education unlike anything he'd received in prison. Dennis dismantled that machine like a surgeon, studied every component, every gear, every circuit, every security feature the manufacturer had designed to prevent tampering. And he found the weak points. The outer casing was secured with a standard lock. Child's play for a professional locksmith. But the manufacturer had been clever. They'd installed an alarm system that would trigger if the machine was opened improperly. The alarm was on a 5-second delay. This was deliberate. Casino staff needed to be able to open machines for maintenance without causing a panic every time. So they had 5 seconds to reach inside and flip a disable switch hidden behind the reels. 5 seconds. That was the window. Dennis practiced, hour after hour, day after day, sliding a thin metal shim through the casing gap, releasing the catch, reaching inside, finding the switch, disabling the alarm. At first it took him 30 seconds, then 20, then 15. After 3 weeks of practice, he could open the machine, disable the alarm, and access the internal mechanism in 11 seconds. But opening the machine was only step 1. Step 2 was the real magic, manipulating the reels to trigger a jackpot. The mechanical slot machines used a series of rotating discs with symbols painted on them. When the lever was pulled, these discs would spin and eventually stop in random positions. If all 3 reels showed the same high-value symbol, usually triple bars or triple sevens, the machine would complete a circuit and release the maximum payout. Random was the key word. The machines were designed so that jackpot combinations occurred rarely, maybe once every 10,000 pulls. The odds were carefully calibrated to ensure the casino always won in the long run. But if you could manually position the reels before they spun, Dennis practiced this too. Learned exactly how to manipulate the internal mechanism to set the reels on a winning combination. Learned how to make it look like a natural jackpot when the machine paid out. After 6 months of preparation, he was ready for his first job. December 15th, 1979. A Tuesday night. The Stardust Casino on the Strip. Dennis walked in at 11:30 p.m., during the graveyard shift change when security was momentarily distracted. He wore a cheap suit, carried a plastic casino bucket, looked like 1,000 other gamblers. He found a three-reel mechanical slot machine in a quiet corner. Sat down, inserted a coin, pulled the lever. Lost. He did this 5 times, establishing himself as a regular player. Then, when the nearest security guard turned away to deal with a drunk tourist, Dennis made his move. 11 seconds. That's all it took. Shim inserted, catch released. Door opened, alarm disabled. Reels positioned, door closed. To anyone watching, and nobody was, he'd just been fidgeting with his coin bucket. Dennis inserted another coin, pulled the lever. The reels spun, slowed, stopped. Triple sevens. Bells rang, lights flashed. A casino attendant appeared with a smile and a clipboard. "Congratulations, sir. Looks like you hit our $500 jackpot." Dennis smiled back. Acted surprised. Collected his winnings. Tipped the attendant $20. Walked out of the Stardust $480 richer. And absolutely nobody suspected a thing. Over the next decade, Dennis Nickrash became a ghost. He hit casino after casino, up and down the Strip. Never too often in the same place. Never greedy enough to raise suspicion. He'd hit a machine for $500 or $1,000, collect his winnings and disappear for weeks before trying again. The casinos knew something was wrong. Their accounting showed discrepancies. Machines that had paid out recently would pay out again, far more frequently than probability allowed. But when security reviewed footage, they saw only lucky players. When technicians examined the machines, they found no evidence of tampering. Dennis was too good, too careful, too patient. He varied his disguises, sometimes a businessman in a suit, sometimes a tourist in Hawaiian shirts, sometimes an elderly retiree with a cane. He studied the casino schedules and only worked during shift changes when security was distracted. He never returned to the same machine twice, and the money accumulated. By 1986, Dennis had stolen approximately $10 million from Las Vegas casinos. He lived modestly, not too flashy, not too poor. He invested carefully in legitimate businesses. He paid his taxes on his gambling winnings. He was living the perfect criminal life until June 12, 1986. It was supposed to be a routine job, a mechanical slot machine at the Desert Inn, positioned in a quiet hallway away from the main casino floor. Dennis had hit this exact machine 3 times before. He knew the security patterns, knew the blind spots, knew he had a clean 3-minute window during the 3 p.m. shift change. What he didn't know was that the Desert Inn had hired a new security guard, an eager young man named Marcus Webb, who'd arrived 30 minutes early for his first day, wanting to make a good impression. Marcus wasn't in uniform yet, wasn't on duty, was just walking through the casino, learning the layout, and he watched Dennis Nickrash open a slot machine in 11 seconds flat. Marcus saw the shim, saw Dennis's hand moving inside the machine, saw the practiced, professional movement of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. Marcus didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, shouting for backup. Dennis looked up, saw the guard running toward him, made a split-second decision. He pulled the lever on the machine he'd just rigged. Triple sevens, $200 jackpot, bells and lights. As Dennis stood to collect his winnings, Marcus tackled him. The evidence was overwhelming. The shim in Dennis's pocket, his fingerprints inside the machine, surveillance footage showing the entire manipulation. Dennis Nickrash was arrested, charged with fraud and grand larceny. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And in that cell, Dennis began planning his masterpiece. Nevada State Prison, 1986-1991. Most criminals would see a second conviction as a sign to go straight. Give up. Find a legitimate career. Dennis saw it as graduate school. The world was changing. Technology was advancing. The old mechanical slot machines were being phased out, replaced by electronic versions with computer chips and video displays. Security cameras were becoming more sophisticated. Facial recognition was emerging as a real threat. Dennis could have been discouraged. Instead, he was fascinated. He read voraciously, subscribed to electronics magazines, studied computer programming manuals, learned everything he could about the new generation of slot machines. These new machines were different. Instead of mechanical reels, they used video screens that showed virtual reels spinning. Instead of gears and circuits, they used computer software to generate random outcomes. The randomization was controlled by something called a random number generator, a chip programmed to produce unpredictable results. Unpredictable. That was the theory anyway. But Dennis understood something fundamental. Computers aren't truly random. They only simulate randomness. Every computer program has code, and code can be manipulated. He just needed to figure out how. The problem was he didn't have the technical expertise. He was a locksmith, not a programmer. He could open any physical lock in the world, but software was a different beast. He needed a partner, someone with the technical skills he lacked, someone smart enough to crack computer code, but willing to bend the law. And Dennis knew exactly who to call. Eugene Bulgarino, 28 years old, computer programmer for a defense contractor, and distant cousin to a high-ranking member of the Genovese crime family. Dennis and Eugene had met once, briefly back in Chicago before Dennis's first arrest. Eugene had been a teenager then, a computer prodigy who'd gotten caught hacking into his high school's computer system to change grades. The Genovese family had made the problem disappear and kept Eugene on their radar as a potentially useful asset. Now Dennis was calling in a favor. He wrote to Eugene from prison, carefully worded letters that discussed legitimate business opportunities in gaming technology. Nothing that would raise flags if prison censors read them. Eugene understood. He visited Dennis in prison, supposedly to discuss a legitimate security consulting business they might start after Dennis's release. What they actually discussed was this: how do you hack a slot machine? Eugene was intrigued. The challenge appealed to his technical ego, and Dennis promised him something the Genovese family never had: a true partnership with equal profit sharing. Well, almost equal, 60-40 split. But still, when Dennis was released in 1991, Eugene was waiting. They had work to do. Eugene Bulgarino purchased 2 identical slot machines through a dummy corporation he'd set up, told the manufacturer he was starting a legitimate gaming arcade, paid cash, no questions asked. The machines were delivered to a warehouse Eugene rented in Henderson, Nevada, just outside Las Vegas, away from prying eyes. This is where Dennis and Eugene spent the next 4 years. They dismantled those machines like archaeologists examining ancient artifacts. Every circuit board photographed, every chip cataloged, every line of code analyzed. Eugene focused on the software. The random number generator was the key, a chip that cycled through thousands of number combinations per second. When a player pulled the lever, the machine would stop on whatever number the RNG had reached at that exact millisecond. The outcomes were predetermined by the chip's programming. The illusion of randomness was just that, an illusion. The machine simply cycled through winning and losing combinations so quickly that it appeared random to human perception. But if you could control the RNG, Eugene worked on the problem for 2 years, wrote and rewrote code, tested thousands of variations, failed again and again, until March 1993 when he finally cracked it. The solution was elegant. Eugene created a small computer chip, no bigger than a postage stamp, that could be installed directly onto the slot machine's motherboard. This chip would override the machine's normal RNG programming, but only temporarily. Here's how it worked. Once installed, the chip would remain dormant for exactly 24 hours. During this period, the machine would operate normally. No unusual behavior, nothing to alert casino security or maintenance staff. After 24 hours, the chip would activate for a precisely timed 6-hour window. During this window, the RNG would be corrupted. The machine would cycle through winning combinations almost exclusively. Any pull of the lever during these 6 hours would result in a payout. Small wins, medium wins, and crucially, jackpots. After the 6-hour window closed, the chip would self-destruct. Not literally, it wouldn't explode or anything dramatic, but the chip's circuitry would irreversibly degrade, making it impossible to detect after the fact. Casino technicians, examining the machine later, would find nothing unusual. No evidence of tampering, just a motherboard with a slightly irregular chip that could easily be a manufacturer's variation. It was, quite possibly, the perfect crime. But there were still problems to solve. Problem 1, installation. Dennis could open the machines, but the new electronic slots had more sophisticated alarms, more sensors, more ways to detect intrusion. He'd need to be even faster than before, in and out in under 30 seconds. Problem 2, surveillance. Cameras were everywhere now, higher resolution, better angles, sophisticated recording systems that kept footage for months. Dennis couldn't just disguise himself anymore. He needed to be invisible. Problem 3, collection. The new machines didn't pay out cash directly. Instead, they printed tickets that had to be redeemed at the casino cage. And the biggest jackpots required winners to provide identification and fill out tax forms. Win too many jackpots with the same ID, and the IRS would come asking questions. Dennis needed a team. Building a criminal crew is like casting a movie. You need the right people for each role. People who are skilled but not too ambitious, smart but controllable, desperate enough to take risks, but not so desperate they'd panic under pressure. Dennis spent 8 months recruiting. His first hire was Michael Balsamo, age 34, former casino dealer who'd been fired for skimming chips and blacklisted from working in Vegas casinos. Michael was bitter, broke, and willing to do almost anything for money. More importantly, he knew casino operations from the inside, knew the security patterns, knew which staff members were lazy and which were sharp. Michael's role, surveillance. He would scout target casinos, identify vulnerable machines, document camera positions, and plan the optimal approach routes. Next was Reed McNeil, age 41, convicted con artist who'd served time for running an insurance fraud scheme. Reed had one particular skill that Dennis needed. He was a master of disguise, could change his appearance so thoroughly that even people who knew him wouldn't recognize him in another look. Reed's role, costume and makeup designer. He would create disguises for the team members. Then there was Sandra Miller, age 29, single mother of 2, drowning in debt, working 3 minimum wage jobs. Sandra had no criminal record. She was attractive, well-spoken, and most importantly, her face wouldn't be in any law enforcement database. Sandra's role, the collector. She would be the one to play the rigged machines and collect the winnings, the face that casino security would see and dismiss as just another lucky gambler. Dennis recruited 6 more people for various roles: camera blockers, lookouts, backup collectors. He kept the team compartmentalized. Most members didn't know each other's real names or how many people were involved in total. Only Eugene knew the full scope of the operation, and Eugene stayed completely behind the scenes, never setting foot in a casino. By November 1995, they were ready. The profit split was non-negotiable. Dennis took 70% of all winnings. Eugene took 15%. The remaining 15% was divided among the other 9 team members based on their role in each job. It seemed unfair, and it was. But Dennis had learned from his time with the Genovese family, the boss takes the lion's share. That's how it works. Most of the team accepted these terms because even 1 to 2% of $1 million jackpot was more money than they'd ever seen in their lives. But this inequality would eventually become Dennis's downfall. For now, though, they were ready to rob Las Vegas blind. November 18th, 1995, the Luxor Casino, 2:47 a.m. Dennis Nekrash walked through the casino's main entrance, wearing a charcoal suit, wire-rimmed glasses, and a full beard, all part of Reed's carefully crafted disguise. Underneath the suit, he carried a small leather case containing the tools of his trade. The custom slot machine key Eugene had fabricated, a small flashlight, and one of Eugene's RNG override chips. He'd memorized the casino layout from Michael's reconnaissance, knew exactly where he was going. The target was a megabuck slot machine positioned near the casino's north entrance. Prime real estate with good foot traffic, but, crucially, a brief surveillance blind spot. Michael had discovered it 3 weeks ago. At exactly 2:45 a.m., the camera monitoring that section would auto-rotate to scan the entrance doors. This rotation took 45 seconds. During those 45 seconds, the Megabucks machine was only partially visible. 45 seconds. More than enough time. Dennis sat down at a nearby slot machine and fed it $20. Played casually. Waited. Around him, other team members drifted into position. Sandra Miller sat at a blackjack table with a clear view of the target. Two others, posing as a couple, stood near the machine, appearing to debate whether to play it. At 2:43 a.m., Dennis checked his watch. Waited. At 2:44:30, he stood and walked toward the megabucks machine. The couple moved into position, their bodies blocking the partial camera angle. Dennis reached the machine at exactly 2:45 as the camera began its rotation. He'd practiced this sequence hundreds of times in the warehouse. Every movement was automatic. Muscle memory, key inserted, door released, alarm wire bypassed, motherboard exposed. The override chip was mounted on a small magnetic strip. Dennis pressed it onto the motherboard next to the existing RNG chip. It clicked into place. Door closed, lock engaged, key removed, 28 seconds. Total. Dennis walked away. The couple at the machine played a few rounds, lost some money, moved on. The camera completed its rotation, resuming normal surveillance. Nothing suspicious, just another group of gamblers having a typical Vegas night. Dennis left the casino at 2:53 a.m., drove to a 24-hour diner on Boulder Highway, ordered coffee and pancakes, waited. 24 hours from now, the chip would activate. For 6 hours after that, the Megabucks machine would pay out winning combinations almost constantly. The question was, how big could they go before attracting attention? They decided on conservative first. Test the system. Make sure it worked. The next night, Sandra Miller entered the Luxor at 11:30 p.m. She wore a red dress, heels, makeup that made her look older than her years. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, transforming herself from a harried single mom into a woman who looked like she belonged in a high-end casino. At 11:47 p.m., she sat down at the rigged Megabucks machine. First pull, $100 win. Second pull, $500 win. Third pull, $250 win. Sandra kept playing, kept winning. Small amounts, but consistently. After 20 minutes and about 60 pulls, she was up $8,000. That's when Dennis, watching from across the casino, sent her the signal. Cash out now. Sandra collected her voucher ticket, walked to the casino cage, provided her ID, filled out the tax form. Congratulations on your lucky night, the cashier said, counting out $8,000 in hundreds. Sandra smiled, tipped the cashier $200, and left. In the parking lot, she met Dennis, handed him $5,600, 70% of the take, kept $200 for herself, 15%. The other team members split the remaining $200. For one night's work, Sandra had made more than she earned in 3 months at her legitimate jobs. She was hooked. Over the next 8 months, they hit 13 different casinos. Sometimes they'd take $10,000, sometimes $30,000. Always careful not to be too greedy. Always varied the targets and timing. By July 1997, they'd stolen approximately $600,000. Then Dennis decided it was time to go big. July 4th, 1997. Independence Day. Dennis had been planning this job for 3 months. Harrah's Casino had a Megabucks machine that had been building up for nearly a year without paying out a major jackpot. The progressive prize had climbed to $3.7 million. $3.7 million. Life-changing money? Dennis's share would be $2.59 million, enough to retire, enough to disappear, enough to never risk anything again. But it was also risky. A $3.7 million payout would attract intense scrutiny, IRS investigation, casino security review, background checks on the winner. They needed everything to be perfect. Reed spent 2 weeks creating a complete identity for the winner. Not just a disguise, but a full backstory. Social security number, employment history, rental agreement, credit cards, all fake but meticulously documented. The winner would be Margaret Williams, a 37-year-old office manager from Los Angeles, visiting Vegas for the holiday weekend. She had a Facebook page, an apartment, a work history, everything needed to pass a basic background check. Sandra would play Margaret Williams. The installation went flawlessly. Dennis placed the chip on July 3rd at 11:31 p.m. 24 hours later, the machine would be hot. July 4th, 11:35 p.m. Sandra entered Harrah's as Margaret Williams, She dyed her hair, wore colored contacts, spoke with a different accent. Even her walk was different. She played the Megabucks machine for 12 minutes before it happened. Triple diamonds, maximum bet, progressive jackpot, 3.7 million, Sandra screamed, genuinely shocked despite knowing what would happen. Within seconds, casino staff swarmed. Security, managers, marketing team. Everyone wanted to congratulate the newest millionaire. Champagne appeared. Photos were taken. Casino management gushed about how wonderful it was for someone to win on Independence Day. God bless America, Sandra said, laughing and crying simultaneously. What happened next would haunt Dennis Nikrash for the rest of his life. In the casino surveillance room, head of security, Thomas Reeves was reviewing the footage. Something bothered him. He couldn't articulate what exactly. Just an instinct built from 20 years of catching casino cheats. He ran back the footage. Watched the hour before the jackpot, saw normal activity, nothing suspicious. But then he noticed. At 11:31 p.m., the camera monitoring that section had briefly adjusted. Just slightly. Just enough to change the angle. Who touched camera 47, he asked. The surveillance technician checked the logs. Nobody. No maintenance recorded. Then why did it move? They reviewed the footage from the previous night. July 3rd, 11:31 p.m. Again, the camera had shifted. Again, no record of maintenance. 2 nights in a row. Same time. Same camera. Reeves felt his stomach tighten. Pull up camera 47 from... He checked his notes. November 18th, 1995. Around 2:45 a.m. The technician looked confused. That's almost 2 years ago. You think there's a connection? Just pull it. They watched. And there it was. November 18th, 1995. 2:45 a.m. Camera 47 rotates slightly, view partially obscured. And in that brief window, a man in a charcoal suit approaches a Megabucks machine. Zoom in on his face, Reeves said. The image was grainy. The man wore glasses and a beard. But something about his body language, the way he moved. I've seen this guy before, Reeves muttered. Different look, but same movement pattern. He couldn't prove anything. The casino paid out Sandra's $3.7 million. But Thomas Reeves added Margaret Williams to a watch list. And he started reviewing footage from other casinos, looking for similar patterns. He found them. Different casinos, different faces, but the same MO. Camera adjustments, brief blind spots, consistent winners. Someone was running the most sophisticated slot machine scam in Vegas history, and Thomas Reeves was going to catch them. After the Harrah's job, Dennis should have stopped. $2.59 million in the bank, enough to retire comfortably, enough to disappear before the investigation closed in. But Dennis had a problem, the same problem that destroys most successful criminals. He couldn't stop. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the challenge, the thrill, the intoxication of beating a system everyone said was unbeatable. So he kept going. August 1997, $180,000 from the Rio. September 1997, $240,000 from the MGM Grand. October 1997, $95,000 from Caesar's Palace. The team was getting sloppy. Sandra was spending money too freely, drawing IRS attention. Michael was bragging to his girlfriend about a big score. Reed was tired of his 1% cut and starting to complain. Eugene warned Dennis to shut it down. We've made our money. Let's disappear before someone talks. But Dennis had his eyes on the biggest prize of all. The Megabucks progressive jackpot at the Desert Inn had climbed to $17 million, $17 million, $11.9 million for Dennis, enough to be truly wealthy, enough to never worry about money again. One more job, Dennis told Eugene. Then we're done, I promise. Eugene didn't believe him, but he provided one more chip. The job was scheduled for January 14th, 1998. It never happened. Phoenix, Arizona, January 10th, 1998. FBI agents Thomas Chen and Maria Rodriguez sat across from a scared young man named Kevin Walsh. Kevin was 24 years old, facing federal charges for credit card fraud, looking at 8 to 10 years in prison, unless he could offer them something valuable. I know about a slot machine scam in Vegas, Kevin said. Big money. Millions of dollars. The agents leaned forward. Kevin Walsh had been one of Dennis's camera blockers for 6 months. He'd participated in 8 jobs, made about $15,000 total, and felt he'd been underpaid for his work. When Kevin got arrested for an unrelated crime, he saw an opportunity. The guy running it is named Dennis something. I don't know his last name, but he's the one who rigs the machines. He's got a whole team. Been doing this for years. How does he rig them? Agent Chen asked. I don't know the technical details. I just block cameras. But there's this other guy, Eugene, who makes some kind of computer chip. They install it in the machines. The FBI agents exchanged glances. If this was true, it was the biggest casino fraud case in Nevada history. What do you want in exchange for this information? Reduced sentence, witness protection, and I want the money they owe me. How much do they owe you? About $100,000, my fair share. Agent Rodriguez smiled thinly. We can't get you money from an illegal operation, but we can offer a reduced sentence if your information leads to arrests. Kevin thought about it. Dennis had promised him bigger cuts, had said next time and be patient and trust me, but Kevin was done being patient. Deal, he said. The FBI moved fast. Within 72 hours, they had warrants, surveillance teams, undercover agents positioned in Las Vegas casinos. They identified Eugene Bulgarino through Kevin's descriptions and phone records, put him under surveillance, traced his warehouse rental, obtained warrants for his financial records, and on January 14, 1998, the same day Dennis was planning to hit the Desert Inn for $17 million, FBI agents executed simultaneous raids. They hit Dennis's apartment at 6:47 a.m., broke down the door with a battering ram, found Dennis in bed, completely surprised. In his apartment, they found 2 complete slot machines, professional locksmith tools, $127,000 in cash hidden in a false wall, detailed notes on casino security schedules, 3 fake IDs, and most damning, a small handheld computer chip identical to the ones Eugene had been manufacturing simultaneously. Agents raided Eugene's warehouse in Henderson. They found the remaining chips, computer equipment, detailed schematics of slot machine motherboards, and a ledger documenting every job they'd pulled over the past 2 years. The evidence was overwhelming. Dennis Nickrash sat in the FBI interrogation room, handcuffed, watching his life collapse around him for the 3rd time. Agent Chen laid out the case methodically. We have your accomplice Kevin Walsh's testimony. We have the physical evidence. We have casino surveillance footage from 13 different locations. We have your financial records showing deposits that don't match any legitimate source of income. Dennis said nothing. Mr. Nickrash, we know you didn't do this alone. Eugene Bulgarino is already in custody. We've seized his equipment, but we believe there are others involved. Casino insiders, maybe corrupt security personnel. Help us identify everyone involved, and we can discuss reducing your sentence. Dennis looked Agent Chen in the eye and smiled, the same smile he'd given that Chicago detective 28 years ago. I want to call my lawyer, Agent Chen sighed. You're 57 years old. The charges you're facing carry a minimum of 20 years. You'll die in prison. Is loyalty to these people really worth that? It's not about loyalty, Dennis said quietly. It's about principle. Principle? You're a thief. I'm a thief who keeps his word. Dennis never gave up a single name, never confirmed Eugene's involvement despite the overwhelming evidence. Never identified any member of his team. The only person who talked was Kevin Walsh, and he only knew a fraction of the operation. Sandra Miller, Michael Balsamo, Reed McNeil, and the others were never charged. They walked away with their shares of the money and disappeared into ordinary American life. Eugene Bulgarino was convicted based on the physical evidence found in his warehouse. He received 12 years and served 9 before being released on parole. He never worked with computers again, took a job as a grocery store manager, and died of a heart attack in 2017. Dennis Nickrash was offered multiple plea deals. Each time, prosecutors asked for names. Each time, Dennis refused. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in federal prison. His name was entered into Nevada's Black Book, the official list of people permanently banned from entering any casino in the state. But that wasn't the end of Dennis Nickrash's story. During Dennis's trial, something extraordinary emerged. Casino security experts and FBI forensic accountants had been trying to calculate the total amount Dennis had stolen. The number kept growing. Kevin Walsh testified about 8 jobs he'd participated in. Surveillance footage confirmed 13 separate incidents. Financial records showed suspicious deposits going back to 1995. But when Thomas Reeves from Harrah's Security testified, he dropped a bombshell. I've been reviewing footage from not just Harrah's, but from 24 major casinos over the past 15 years, Reeves said. I've identified what I believe to be Mr. Nickrash's signature pattern. The camera adjustments, the timing, the approach vectors. And what did you find? The prosecutor asked. I found similar patterns going back to 1979. The courtroom went silent. I believe Mr. Nickrash has been cheating Las Vegas casinos for nearly 20 years. Not just the recent sophisticated operation, but an earlier campaign using mechanical slot machines. Reeves presented analysis of hundreds of unexplained slot machine payouts between 1979 and 1986. Different casinos, different machines, but the same meticulous pattern. How much money are we talking about? The judge asked. Reeves consulted his notes. Conservative estimate? The electronic chip operation from 1995 to 1998 accounts for approximately $6.7 million in confirmed thefts. But the earlier mechanical machine period, we're estimating $10 million, possibly more. The prosecutor did the math. Total estimated theft, $16.7 million over 22 years. Dennis sat at the defense table, his expression unreadable. He never confirmed or denied the larger figure, never spoke about his earlier crimes, never gave prosecutors the satisfaction of a full confession, but reporters in the courtroom saw something in his eyes. Not regret, not shame, pride. He'd beaten Vegas for 22 years, stolen $16.7 million, built and executed the most sophisticated slot machine scam in history, and he'd done it all without hurting anyone, without violence, without destruction. In Dennis's mind, he'd simply taken money from corporations that built their fortunes on separating people from their cash through rigged games of chance. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd cheated the cheaters. Dennis Nickrash served his full sentence. No parole, no early release for good behavior. In prison, he became something of a celebrity. Other inmates called him the slot machine whisperer. Guards asked him for gambling advice. True crime writers requested interviews. Dennis turned them all down. He spent his time reading, playing chess, and teaching other inmates basic locksmithing skills so they could find legitimate work after release. He never spoke about his crimes, never bragged, never showed remorse either. He was released in 2005 at age 64, moved to a small apartment in Henderson, Nevada, ironically within a mile of Eugene's old warehouse. He lived on Social Security and a small pension from his pre-criminal life as a legitimate locksmith. He never set foot in a casino again, not because he was banned, though he was, but because the challenge was gone. Modern slot machines had become completely digital, with encryption and security measures that even Eugene couldn't crack. The game had evolved beyond him. In 2009, Dennis was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He'd been a heavy smoker his entire adult life. On his deathbed in a Las Vegas hospital, a young reporter from the Las Vegas Sun managed to get 5 minutes with him. "Do you regret what you did?" the reporter asked. Dennis thought about it for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I regret getting caught. But the work itself, the planning, the execution, the challenge of beating a system everyone said was perfect? No regrets at all." "What about the people you stole from?" "I stole from casinos, corporations, not people. Big difference. But casinos employ thousands of people. Your thefts affected—" Dennis cut him off with a weak laugh. "Kid, do you know how much money flows through a Las Vegas casino every single day? Millions, tens of millions. What I took over 22 years is what the Strip makes in a weekend. I was a rounding error in their quarterly earnings report." "So you don't feel guilty?" "Guilty?" Dennis smiled. "The casinos build their entire business model on the house edge. The games are rigged so the casino always wins in the long run. They've been robbing people legally for decades. I just leveled the playing field for a little while." The reporter asked one final question. "If you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?" Dennis closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I would have stopped after Harrah's. $259 million was enough. The greed got me in the end. That's the only mistake I made. He died 3 days later on February 11, 2010.